Here we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite. We're going to defer the usual rounding off of the cast of characters and everything else. We're going to basically jump straight into Boris Johnson's speech, which has just started. And here we go.
Let's have a look at them on the streets. This is in Barcelona, in fact, and they're building temporary shelters for the homeless.
Let's just skip forward.
Even tighter restrictions. There is virtually...
Calm now. Just want to start things off so we have a live
Some Hindu
reaction.
groups in India believe cow urine has medicinal properties and can ward off coronavirus and other diseases.
Care systems, that is the moment of real danger. To put it simply, if too many people become seriously unwell at one time, the NHS will be unable to handle it, meaning more people are likely to die, not just from coronavirus, but from other illnesses as well. So it's vital to slow the spread of the disease, because that is the way we reduce the number of people needing hospital treatment at any one time, so we can protect the NHS's ability to cope and save more lives. And that's why we've been asking people to stay at home during this pandemic. And though huge numbers are complying, and I thank you all, the time has now come for us all to do more. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. Because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households. That is why people will only be allowed to leave their home for the following very limited purposes. Shopping for basic necessities as infrequently as possible. One form of exercise a day, for example, a run, walk or cycle, alone or with members of your household. Any medical need to provide care or to help a vulnerable person, and travelling to and from work, but only where this is absolutely necessary and cannot be done from home. That's all. These are the only reasons you should leave your home. You should not be meeting friends. If your friends ask you to meet, you should say no. You should not be meeting family members who do not live in your home. You should not be going shopping except for essentials like food and medicine. And you should do this as little as you can. And use food delivery services where you can. If you don't follow the rules, the police will have the powers to enforce them, including through fines and dispersing gatherings. To ensure compliance with the government's instruction to stay at home, we will immediately close all shops selling non-essential goods, including clothing and electronic stores, and other premises, including libraries, playgrounds and outdoor gyms and places of worship. We'll stop all gatherings of more than 2 people in public, excluding people you live with. And we'll stop all social events, including weddings, baptisms and other ceremonies, but excluding funerals. Parks will remain open for exercise, but gatherings will be dispersed. No Prime Minister wants to enact measures like this. I know the damage that this disruption is doing and will do to people's lives, to their businesses and to their jobs. And that's why we've produced a huge and unprecedented programme of support both for workers and for business. And I can assure you that we will keep these restrictions under constant review. We will look again in 3 weeks and relax them if the evidence shows we are able to. But at present, there are just no easy options. The way ahead is hard, and it is still true that many lives will, sadly, be lost. And yet it is also true that there is a clear way through. Day by day, we are strengthening our amazing NHS with 7,500 former clinicians now coming back to the service. With the time you buy by simply staying at home, We are increasing our stocks of equipment. We are accelerating our search for treatments. We're pioneering work on a vaccine. And we're buying millions of testing kits that will enable us to turn the tide on this invisible killer. I want to thank everyone who is working flat out to beat the virus. Everyone from the supermarket staff to the transport workers to the carers to the nurses and doctors on the front line. But in this fight, we can be in no doubt that each and every one of us is directly enlisted. Each and every one of us is now obliged to join together to halt the spread of this disease, to protect our NHS, and to save many, many thousands of lives. And I know that as they have in the past, so many times, the people of this country will rise to that challenge, and we will come through it stronger than ever. We will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together. And therefore, I urge you, at this moment of national emergency, to stay at home, protect our NHS, and save lives. Thank you.
And there we go. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Is everybody still here?
Yeah. So when he says protect our NHS, is someone attacking it? Why is this such a theme? I'm a little confused from the side of the.
The issue
we can't cope with the amount of people if we were all just, running around rubbing our noses on each other and stuff, I guess.
It's about, because we've seen what's happened in Italy. The Italian healthcare service was massively overwhelmed, which obviously caused the problems, which were manifold in that they suddenly had to start turning people away, and their death rate, their mortality went straight through the roof. So when he says protect our NHS, he wants to basically slow the spread of the virus in order for the actual number of patients that the hospitals have to deal with to drastically either decrease or not get any worse, at least, because we obviously have a limited number of ventilators and ICU kit and all that jazz.
Basically, if you stay home and don't get ill, you won't need to go to hospital, so that the services will be available for people who need it more.
Okay, so the reasonable way to interpret that is, number one, don't go there if you don't need to, because people who are in more critical condition need the facilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, don't get sick.
Pretty much.
Stay home, you're not going to get ill.
Okay.
But now this is the step up, because of course them empowering the police to basically say, if they come across you in the street, where are you going? What are you doing? And if you say something other than I'm going straight to work or I'm going to grab my essentials and then go home, then they will either fine you or send you home. From what I understand, it's a nationwide lockdown until further notice, because you'll notice that he didn't say how long this would last.
Well, except other than it being reviewed in 3 weeks and may relax the measures if necessary.
I just wanted to throw in Morgoth's great line. He said, Britain is a health service with a nation attached to it.
Well, I'm just wondering how useful this will be. Because, I mean, even if they find, a bunch of chaps riding around on bikes in the park or whatever, in a group of half a dozen doing wheelies, if the police stop them and they all just say, "Oh, we're going to work,"
well, I imagine
what's the next step from that?
The police come out and chase them.
He mentioned the teeth. He said fines, dispersal of gatherings. He didn't say arrests, but I assume that's always implied. Right?
Well, yes, but this is what I mean. I mean, how would one have to imagine this in reality? Because given that they're not saying, in Italy there was like an official document that you have to carry, that it's something that the government set up and you kind of print it out at home and you basically stipulate your reasons for being out, where you're actually going, what you're doing. So there's nothing like that mentioned. So, when he says the police will enforce it and you can only be out for such and such reasons, well, what's preventing anybody who's out for any purposes, anybody sunbathing in the park saying, I'm going shopping?
I'm pretty sure if you get caught sunbathing in the park, you'll get moved along rather than being allowed to.
No,
but British are surely.
So one is speaking of potential teeth.
Yes.
I was going to say, surely it's the British that where the honor system would work, right?
Well, the simple thing is that we've had one government announcement after the other saying, don't go out, do social distancing. And particularly over this weekend, we then afterwards had lots of front pages of newspapers, titled Madness and whatever, where you basically see, Welsh hills, literally, crawling with people, parks in which folks are just jam-packed, and you just go, I'm sorry, but, somewhere we're missing something here. And then when the government then makes an announcement like this, it all sounds nice and sort of, oh well, this is the way he intends this or whatever, but in reality, so if the police now have the right to ask you, what are you doing, where are you going, to what extent have the police got the right to say, I don't believe you?
I imagine it will be discretionary, which is why it's causing issues for people like Peter Hitchens.
Yeah, I mean, if you're carrying, I don't know, like a football or something like that, and the copper says, "Oi, oi, where are you going, mate?" And you say,
I'm going to work, or I'm going shopping.
I'm going to work. I'm Pele. Then they might just go, I don't believe you.
Yes, that answer had somewhat of a Scottish flavour to it, didn't it?
Well, I imagine.
I'm going to work. I'm Pele. Yes.
I imagine.
I'm Pele, by the way.
I imagine what will end up happening is that the police will go on more beats, effectively, and that if the people are running into the same coppers, unless these people are so determined to get out that they plan a different route through different boroughs, for instance in London, in order to get anywhere, then they're going to get caught. And it's like, well, you're here, but you said you were supposed to be in work, but it's middle of the day, and that sort of thing. You're going to end up getting caught, effectively, aren't you? And then I don't imagine anyone's going to get fined on a first offence, right?
Hey,
I mean,
Mark,
if it's a
real
group
quick.
of 6-year-olds or something like that, then yeah, they can't say, "I'm going to work." Well, maybe they're going down the mine.
Mark, would you unmute Rhubba? You've got an override. He can't undo it.
Sure thing, if he works.
Rhubba, there you are.
I thought I was put on the naughty step there for a moment.
Not really.
Well, you were making a lot of noise during Boris' speech, so we muted you.
It's this chaos. I don't know if I told you in the chat, but my house is just chaotic at the moment. So I'm running between rooms trying to sort out everybody's problems.
Oh dear.
You might want to send people outside and then let the police deal with them.
Yes, that's DEFCON 4, isn't it? You guys congregate in a small group of 3 outside the house.
I know.
They're from the same household, though, so that's allowed, right?
Yeah. That's. No, I mean the family quarantine has been quite successful this week, but it's just business calls are coming in to my wife at about between now and midnight, and the boys, just because they haven't been running around in a school playground with all their mates, they've still got too much energy.
Right.
I imagine what will also happen, aside from an increase in beats, is we are the CCTV nation, right? I don't know. Have you visited the UK, Radlib?
Several times, yeah.
And you may have noticed the preponderance of cameras that we have around. So I imagine the police will be tying into that and basically going out to accost people in the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the cameras have always proved very useful so far, particularly after terror attacks.
Yes,
Because
they were
after
the
everybody's been killed, they are then able to show us retrospective pictures of the people with rucksacks taking a train.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You know,
Yeah.
it's the greatest deterrent we have, really, is that we'll plaster them all over the media.
So
And we
British,
had
I
all the
wanted to
people
go ahead, Rhubba.
to say if it stopped just one crime, if it saved just one life, I would have cameras on every corner in every house in every blah blah blah.
Who said that?
Just everybody, you know, the kind of lazy pundits that get on Good Morning Britain and the right and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I remember a BBC interview once with a chap who was, I believe he was a criminologist or some such thing, and he said, well, next time when governments decide to spend, because these are not just national, it's a local governments to a large extent, decide to spend all the available money in crime deterrence on these sort of cameras, it would be nice if they would actually consult with some folks that know a little bit about crime deterrence before they spend their entire crime deterrence budget on something that has really been shown not to work.
I didn't know that it had been shown not to work. I mean, I believe it, but
well, apparently it has a short-term effect. If you put up cameras, it will depress crime in that area for a while, but it will then come back up again.
Interesting.
It's also
I've seen things like this before.
They do all that ends up happening is, first of all, criminals learn where the cameras are, and then they take measures to avoid them. And secondly, the police get lax and kind of lackadaisical about the whole thing.
Yes, a great percentage of cameras at any given time are actually not working.
Yes, that's also the case.
And also, what the local criminals and various louts very quickly learn with the first few times they come up against law enforcement and end up perhaps in a court and whatever, is that very often the pictures from these cameras are so rotten quality that just showing the silhouette of a man 200 yards away doesn't actually help convict anybody.
No, let's say when they want to run facial recognition through all these things, have they worked out that actually the resolution on these things is like 10p? So it doesn't really work.
Britisher, we have determined that the assailant was a human. We think.
Yes. He
we
was humanoid.
It was a
Yes.
humanoid.
Do they identify as a human?
Hey, so going back to your comments, Britisher, I just want to, there's accusations occasionally of you waffling. It sounds like what you're saying is Johnson is waffling, and you want him to be even more authoritarian and hardcore than he's being. Is that correct?
Well, I want him to actually tell me what it is he is intending to do. Whereas to me, that sounded rather vague.
Well, I don't think there's much vague about stay in your bloody house.
Getting fined and
well, stay in your house. You can come out for these purposes, which then basically means these are the purposes you can state. But the thing is, what is the actual mechanism?
Why don't you find out?
By that you can then determine how how strict this actually is. And that's what I mean. We don't really have that much of an indication as to how strict this is actually intended to be.
It sounds very kind of old-fashioned British.
I think the trick to getting right,
isn't it? It's when Robin Williams years ago did this routine about the British police, and he said in Britain the police go stop, or I'll yell stop again, and it feels like so that we wouldn't. It's a bit like Sergeant Wilson, isn't it, in Dad's Army? Would you mind just staying indoors, please, for a little bit? And if you don't stay indoors, we're going to just remind you again to stay indoors and perhaps escort you or shove you in the right direction, rather than being heavy-handed, rather than you will remain in your house, cease and desist. It sounds almost like the Prime Minister wants it all to be very consensual and Sergeant Wilson and kind of diffident.
is it that he actually has just announced something that is terribly strict, but his being Boris, he still wants to sound like the affable Sergeant Wilson, and therefore couches it in language that allows him to sound like that?
I think.
Or is it that he is a politician who wants to give the impression as if he is terribly decisive and strong, and yet the measures he is actually announcing are not that rigid?
Bridget,
You can easily get around them.
Bridget, you have failed to grasp the other kind of ramification. You're focusing on you've been told that you're not allowed to, or you're not supposed to meet friends or family members who you don't live with, etc. But what I think is the bigger thing is that all shops selling non-essential goods have been ordered to close. Libraries, playgrounds, outdoor gyms, places of worship, all closed. All social events, including weddings and baptisms, banned. Funerals are not included, but everything else is. And parks are allowed to be to remain open for exercise, because you're allowed to do one form of exercise, but gatherings will be dispersed. So, I think the wider ramification of this is he's reduced.
Do you want to go outside?
Yes, he's reduced the number of options for people to want to go outside, aside from anything else. Given that, on top of all that stuff, we've already closed indoor gyms, cinemas, theatres, and pubs, and that sort of thing, and restaurants.
I thought the shutdown of weddings, but not funerals, was, I don't know. It sounded very...
Funerals are usually smaller affairs, so...
And chances are there are going to be a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they will have to get the bodies out of the morgues.
My sister-in-law got married on Saturday, and it was basically the registrar, the bride and groom, and 2 witnesses. They each brought a friend each, and kind of later on in the summer they'll have the big celebration. But they were able to do a wedding ceremony with only 5 people in the room.
Right.
Yes, and my granduncle died last month, and his funeral was meant to be on the 27th. And basically, the funeral is going ahead, but there will be, other than the closest of his family, there will be no one there. So the family decided that we'll have a memorial thing sort of later on in the year once this is all over. But it's
right.
Not really much you can do.
I tell you what, this is too miserable. I don't like this.
Really is.
This is all hideously depressing. We should all go into stasis for approximately 3 million years.
That's a nice segue.
That is a nice segue.
Wobble, 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 and we're in the 22nd century.
Is it? I mean, that's not 3 million, really. We're just in the 20th.
Well, the show starts in the 22nd century.
22nd century, yes.
It's true.
Yeah.
And then it goes...
Even though he says that he's a 23rd century guy at one point.
Well, we'll get onto continuity, I'm sure, at some point over the course of the evening. Right, I'm gonna smash out the Boris picture. He goes away, and we replace him with something else entirely. I'm also going to read the super chats which have come in, just so that we can get across from everything else and onto the main topic of the evening. So Sitzgoen says, not bad, only 22 seconds late. Also, Kick V. Thank you, Sitzgoen. Always appreciated. Coney, current year, says, Mrs. AA. Breastfeeding AAA. Inside AA's degenerate mind. Bitty. Thank you, Coney.
Ooh.
Appreciate that as always. And Harry-Ann Gladiv says, it's cold outside. Bojo won't let me out. I'm all alone, more or less. Let me fly far, far away from here. Fun, fun, fun. In the sun, sun, sun. Thank you
the
very
airport
much.
to shut.
I regret that I didn't sing that in the appropriate thematic tune. You would be the singer, would you, Tails? That's your job, isn't it, to be the musical genius of the group?
Well,
unless
musical something anyway.
Unless British is going to reveal to us that he's actually an astonishing flautist or something like that. I don't know.
Well, he's an excellent rapper, isn't he?
Yeah.
I have
But no one...
absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
Brisha, you can stand by the assertion that you are a great rapper, just that no one will ever hear you rap because it's It's too godly or ungodly,
There is
depending
that
on
possibility.
your perspective.
By
You
the
don't want
way,
the people sensitive.
given the kick V thing, given that V is a meerkat, there is actually today I walked past where sort of outside some house somebody had sort of one of these figures that consisted of 3 meerkats standing upright, and they must have had some packet of miniature muffins or whatever in recent days, because they have taken the little paper cups in which the muffins come
Right.
and tied bits of string to either side of them and made little face masks for the meerkats. So yes, that was my reaction as I walked past. I thought, well, yeah, good on you. You actually gave me a chuckle.
That's funny. But going back to the matter at hand, no more politics for this evening, Britisher, no matter how amusing they may be. We are going to talk all things Red Dwarf. So you should notice in the stream chat, I will just paste it here again, and those of you who are looking at the stream can see already this rather interesting looking can of Guinness. Anyone except Radical Liberation, would you care to hazard a guess at what is on this can of Guinness?
I know. I can see whose signatures are on that.
So we have a chap called Captain Bees in the Discord, who has been showing off that 20 years ago he got a can of Guinness signed by everyone except Craig Charles.
Oh yeah,
Has managed to get the full Red Dwarf posse on there pretty much.
How did you get both Norman Lovett and Hattie Hayridge on the same? Couldn't have been on the same day.
I have no idea.
Unless it was some Red Dwarf convention thing, of course.
Yes, entirely possible. I didn't get that many details, but I just thought that it would be a nice kind of put down to Rhubba, who only went and sat in the audience once. So, you there, Rhubba?
Yeah. Hang on, have I got the mic switched on?
You do.
Yes.
You do.
We can hear you. Yes.
Yes. I went to the recording of the episode Sirens back in the day. I managed to wangle an invite from a fan club.
Sirens, of course, being the episode where these enormous, disgusting fly creatures with straws decide that they're going to suck out the brains of everyone on board by compelling them to. Are they chasing Red Dwarf at that point? They have to go through a nebula, don't they?
It's the first episode where they get rid of Red Dwarf and it's set on Starbug, and I think that happens for about three series that they have.
Kind of asteroid belt, isn't it?
Yes, it's filled with derelict spacecraft, and suddenly they're there, and it contains that kind of grim scene which has Lister kissing Kate. Pete Tranter's sister, and then it zooms out, and of course he's kissing this fly's proboscis. It's the most.
It's some sort of giant beetle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's disgusting. I'll have to.
It really is gross.
Yeah, absolutely disgusting. Let me see if I can grab an image for the joy of the chat who may not.
What are you doing that? I'll tell you how they did it, because when I went to the recording, I had the Starbug set, and that was the only set that they were filmed on. And they had the pre-filmed inserts which contained the creatures, so you never saw an actor in a creature costume hanging around on stage waiting for their cue. So they would do the bit on Starbug, with the 4 characters all joshing, and Hattie Hayridge sits off in a corner with a microphone. And what happens is that then they cut and they show on these monitors above the studio audience the pre-filmed inserts which had the creatures, so it came as a complete surprise to the audience because we weren't primed for what we were going to see then. You do get, I remember on the night, and you do get across on the soundtrack this kind of just the whole audience just went ugh. It was it was a kind of big reveal.
Should have that image up now. The series 6, I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, because it was before the Kachansky era, because she turns up in that episode, doesn't she? But played by her original actress, whose name is escaping me right now. But on the topic of general, Did someone say
I'm hoping
something?
you can hear me still. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I said
Okay, so
no,
Craig
because
Charles.
yeah.
Craig, somebody in the comment I like what said was Craig Charles in jail when the beer can was signed.
He was in jail. Amazing.
No, was he in jail?
Oh,
right.
was he? That's
Right,
that's possible. Yeah. The chat
Depends
Captain
what year it
Bees
was.
Captain Bees is in chat, and he's saying it was a convention. Tailed, well guessed there. So be curious. On the kind of the general gist of things, I'm curious whether or not any of you from any series and from any episode have a particularly favourite character. I should have primed you all really with these questions.
Really should have.
That would have been a good idea. Well, I will kind of kick off. As much as I have a general liking for Rimmer and his character development over the course of the entire thing, my favourite kind of character in there was probably the off-screen appearance of Winnie the Pooh. Do you remember the episode Wax World?
Yes.
Where the characters teleport down to
Oh,
a world populated by wax droids. They get put in prison and are trying to work out where they are. So Lister looks through the window and he says, they're leading someone out to the gallows. It's Winnie the Pooh. And then it's like he's refusing the blindfold. And then you hear the noise of the firing squad going off. And then he turns around and he goes, I've just seen something that no one should ever have to see.
It's funny about that.
Because it's just spoken. It's not seen.
Yeah. But it's that episode when Nero comes in and he keeps slapping.
Oh,
Lister.
Caligula.
Oh, it's Caligula. Sorry, yeah.
It's like stop it.
That was good. Yeah.
Yeah, but played by Tony Hawk, who is the usually the opening comedian to warm the audience up.
Oh, I had no idea.
Not when Rhubba saw it, but in the
No, it was Mark Lamar.
Yeah, in the earlier series, it was Tony Hawk. So, and then later on, he was in the show.
So, Mark, if you were to ask about the best actor, I would have a different answer. But for best character, I'm inclined to go, and I tended to think about the main cast, I guess. I didn't think of going with something like Winnie the Pooh, but I was going to say Crichton. Crichton just really jumps out to me from the whole show. I mean, obviously, they're riffing on lots of science fiction series, and Crichton is the Spock/Data, if you draw from Star Trek, right? The non-human who's learning how to be, but of course they just do it so brilliantly, and the actor does such a great thing. I guess the scene that comes to mind is Crichton expressing with his face.
Expressing ambiguousness. Not ambiguousness, ambivalence.
Ambivalence. Yeah.
He's like,
Two
I'm
things
working
at once,
on
with his face just twisting all out of shape.
That's in one of the.
It's brilliant.
It's one of the later episodes, isn't it? Because they've got Red Dwarf back at that point, and he turns up, and they're trying to work out what's going on because they think that they all got resurrected at the point at which they died, so they still think that it's in the 22nd, 23rd century, and all of a sudden they have this robot, and the psychologist is trying to give him his appraisal, as it were, isn't he?
Right. Yeah.
He's just like, I've been working
is
on.
that when they decide that he's a woman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or that he needs. That's just slightly before that because he needs to be decommissioned. He gets told to have his memory wiped, and he's just going. It's like, you see, we had these nanobots, and it's like nanobots, right? He's like,
right.
yes, and sometimes they go like this. Like what?
like Beaker from the Muppets.
Okay. Yes, pretty much.
Of course, everybody's forgetting the best character in the whole thing, which is Mr. Flibble.
Mr. Flibble, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm blanking. Mr. Flibble
Is the penguin?
Remind me.
Is the penguin?
He's the puppet that Rimmer has when he's
quarantine episode.
Yeah, when he's got the hex virus.
Holovirus, yes.
Yeah, the holovirus, yeah.
And
he's like, it's like, oh, Mr. Flibble, we can't do that. Who'd clean up the mess?
And then, what is it? The listener says, "Are you all right, Mim?" He says, "I'm wearing a gingham frock and talking to a glove puppet. Do you think I'm all right?"
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. You're not crazy, but you want to go on a magic carpet ride to the king of the potato people.
And you want me to believe you're completely sane?
That sounds like what is it? It's like
50 minutes
50 minutes WOO without oxygen.
That'll teach you for being bread baskets.
If I could just, because you just touched on Crichton before. When it comes to the actual function of Crichton in the terms of the script, Crichton was actually a very clever addition, because you've basically got Holly, who is completely off his or her head. So, not really very credible to be the one who explains phenomena. Meanwhile, you have got the two complete incompetents and a cat. So, if they come across anything that actually needs any sort of exposition, any sort of explanation to the audience, there has to be a competent member who can effectively explain it to the idiots, which then also means it effectively also gets explained to the audience, and that's really Crichton's role. No,
Crichton's a funny one.
It's a good point. Yeah,
he arrived effectively by accident. They created him for a single episode, and then he was just. It's funny because I never actually liked that episode particularly much, or the actor who played him. But I guess
Crichton was like the worst Crichton.
And but I'm also coming at it from the point of view that I've seen some of the future episodes, and by the time Robert Llewellyn has really made the character his own, it's a different Crichton, and it's a stronger one, I think. So, but at the time, that Crichton was universally loved, so they carried through that season, and then they had calls for Crichton to come back, and so they made it so that he came back. Because he becomes kind of a renegade. They make him break his programming, whereas it becomes a running joke later on, doesn't it? That he's trying to break his programming in all sorts of different ways. But but just when he works out that he can tell Rimmer to smeg off and just takes the bike.
What are you rebelling against? And he just looks at him and goes, "What do you got?"
What do you got? The Warriors, I think it is. But he also that was an interesting one, because at the beginning they had all sorts of props, and they kept losing all the props. So, for instance, that like Lister had his bike, like a kind of trike thing that he rode around the dwarf on. And it just disappeared for whole episodes at a time. Not because they didn't want to include it. They just couldn't find the thing, or they forgot it existed. And then Crichton drives off on it, and it never comes back. But it's one of those interesting little curiosities that you notice on repeat viewings. But you just... and you go and hunt these little tidbits of information and trivia out. But it is funny.
Crichton also expanded the plot opportunities, because the first two series are kind of schlubs in space, and it's all very internalized on board Red Dwarf. Whereas Crichton comes along, and as Bridges says, he can be an exposition character, and he kind of morphs from a butler robot into a kind of proxy data.
Yeah.
And so you can start introducing all these kind of out-and-out science fiction sort of landing party missions, because Crichton's there to be the de facto science officer.
Well, you'll
Smug
notice.
mode. Well, I can't spend my entire day here saving your sorry little butts. I will now go and do some ironing.
Well, you'll notice as well that Crichton's purpose is that he's the only character. I mean, including Holly, because Holly's, as you say, British often rocker. Crichton's the only character with any in-universe knowledge of the current time period. So he knows about things like the what were the names of the great orangutan-looking things? The began with a G.
Gelf.
The Gelfs, yeah, or the simulants and stuff like that. So, because I feel like they, as much as it's a sitcom in space, and they got enough out of that in general, especially because I think Doug Naylor at one point talks about how they wanted the first season to feel like a submarine in space. And then the second season, they wanted it to be. They realised that, they were onto something here, but they wanted to expand it out. So it became. They changed the colour scheme and stuff like that. It was, from the kind of joke when the episode with two Rimmers, where he's going, I'm changing it from military grey to ocean grey. Was kind of a play on the fact that they wanted to take the series in a slightly different direction.
Well,
yeah,
there is one other character really who, aside from Kachansky, I guess, because Kachansky being a woman, she has to be competent. But there is another character that, aside from Crichton, really has at least some level of competence. But it needed an alternative, an alternate universe first, and that is, how shall I put it? What a guy!
Rimmer, Ace Rimmer,
Right.
Ace Rimmer, and I must say, Ace Rimmer, I thought was one of the most wonderful creations ever. I can honestly say I've not really come across anything like that, where they decide to take a comedy character and then just create him into his polar opposite, and then just let him loose.
I see your Ace Rimmer, and I'm going to raise you the cat as Dwayne Dibley, the Duke of York. That is absolutely my favourite character.
Right.
That's a sub-character, isn't it? It's a character within a character.
I tell you what, I'm offended that no one has declared that the Scutters and their John Wayne obsession are the greatest characters in the series. But
yes, they have, coincidentally, they just happen to have enough fingers to stick two fingers up to
to everyone.
Yeah.
The Scutters were also a creation of kind of the first and second season, and they disappeared in the middle, and no one knew what happened to them. So when it came to the later seasons, they had to rebuild them from scratch, from viewing the archive footage and from memory, to build these things, and of course all the materials that they wanted to make them. So they're slightly different in the later seasons, but they again, like, just a relic that, because of the weird gaps that they had between series, they get left somewhere. The BBC doesn't appear to be very good at, shall we say, storing things.
Well, either the BBC or that particular production company that made it for the BBC.
Well, they said it's the BBC. They used to store all the things in the BBC prop rooms, but the prop rooms were never organised, and everyone would cannibalise all sorts of other stuff, in order to save money. So the props would go missing, or they disappeared into the ether and were never seen again.
I mean, doesn't sort of Dwayne Dibley? I think he sort of has 2 or 3 appearances, doesn't he? Isn't one of the first times they've got this kind of alien creature that sucks emotions from them?
Yeah, the polymorph.
But I think that there's polymorph, but he doesn't become Dwayne Dibley in the original polymorph.
No.
You first meet Dwayne Dibley in, is it Back to Reality?
Yeah. So Back to Reality,
exactly.
then Polymorph 2.
One of the best ever.
Because the first one is they come out of the despair squid encounter with him having lost all his cool, and he's Dwayne Dibley there, and then later on they rehash the character in that one, and when they're escaping the dwarf in the final series.
Yeah, as the Dibley family.
Yes, the Dibley
They all
family.
put teeth in, and
What was
and they put mops on their heads. Yeah.
yeah.
What were the real life characters in the despair squid thing? When they all wake up and
Oh yes.
they're made to believe that the reality had only just been a computer game they'd been playing.
Yes.
So
Crichton was Jack Bullet, Cybernautics Division, which ends up being traffic control.
But didn't he sort of have the feeling that he'd killed somebody or something?
Oh no, he shoots someone when they're hallucinating as they're running away from the fascist cops.
But because the others are effectively their own nightmare, aren't they?
Yes, and he violates his own code of ethics effectively and can't deal with the fact that he's done it.
So while he thinks he's Jack Bullet or whatever, he's actually quite smug, thinking, "Oh well, I'm going up in the world." Whereas
oh yes, I'm
all being turned into complete losers.
As opposed to, well, you say that Rimmer, Rimmer's a homeless bum, who happens to be the brother of Lister,
who is a fascist, if I'm not mistaken.
Who is what is it, like something colonel, like
the head of the secret police. Or
yeah,
something.
the head, basically the head of the Stasi,
the voter,
voter colonel, yeah, and he's just like it's like you are the head of the Ministry of Change. It's like, what do you mean? It's like you change people from being alive people to dead people.
Dead.
Yeah.
And that's the guy
I did want to jump in, Britisher. On the Ace Rimmer character, the only thing that jumps to mind is Jerry Lewis in the Nutty Professor when he's his slick phase. That reminds me from a to Ace Rimmer.
You're cutting out quite a lot there, Radley.
Well, I caught the thing about the Nutty Professor.
Sorry.
So, I mean, the Nutty Professor was famously Jerry Lewis's skit on Dean Martin, wasn't it? That when he was Mr. Slick, when he sort of was this other persona, that's when he pretty much did a riff on Dean Martin. I can see what you mean. Yes, there is a sort of smoothness to Ace Rimmer. So in a way, he's the one who a great many people think is Mr. Wonderful, but at the same time, he is also sort of arrogance and narcissism combined, where you just know you would hate to be stuck in a lift with him.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, there is something wonderful about this kind of comedic conceit of let's create the sort of ultra successful version of this total neurotic, and then let the two of them meet.
But the worst thing about that, Britisher, is that he's the best that Rimmer could be, but also our Arnold Rimmer is like a rarity amongst all the other Rimmers. He's like
exceptional.
Yes, because out of them all, they're both exceptional, but one's exceptionally anal, and the other one's exceptionally amazing.
But they immediately hate each other.
Yes.
One hates the other one for being so successful because he had all the lucky breaks, yada yada yada, even though none of that is true.
Yeah.
And the other one just looks at this conniving, weaselly incompetent and just goes, "No, I can't bear being around this chap."
Yes, it's like
more than likely because to a certain extent he reminds him of his own fallibility. If you know what I mean.
But then he goes from that to riding an alligator out of a Nazi aircraft.
That is my favourite scene in Red Dwarf ever.
Yes.
Yes. I bet he's a sauerkraut.
Yes.
And manages to kill Reg from Coronation Street.
No, it's just... But doesn't that scene happen right at the start of the episode before the titles roll?
Yes,
So
I think
I remember sitting there when it first was broadcast and thinking, what the hell am I watching? That's Reg from Coronation Street in a Nazi uniform. And then there's Ace Rimmer, and it's just thinking, this could, at the time, that it was like one of the best moments in British TV history.
You expect me to concede? I expect you to die, Mr. Rimmer.
Stoke me.
It's pretty much out of a Bond movie, isn't it? That
Oh, yes.
particular, yes.
One of the things about Red Dwarf is that they always had a lot of when they wrote the characters, they put so much depth into the characters. But isn't the break point between what makes Ace Rimmer the all-round what a guy, hero, is that he fails at something that our regular incompetent Rimmer passes, and it's the failure that spurs Ace Rimmer on to become
basically,
Ace.
Yes.
The one that turned out to be Ace, he had to repeat a year of school.
And it's just, it's like being the tallest kid at the swimming pool by a clear 2 feet. It's like, that made me. It's like, really? But I love the fact
they go
that
into quite a lot of depth into that part of it in the book, which is
I like that when Ace is in his reality before he goes off and uses the dimension jumper, the cat is there as a genius kind of engineer. Not engineer.
He's a priest, isn't
he's
he?
He's the priest. He's the chaplain. Yeah.
Yes.
And Lister is an engineer.
Yes,
That's right.
Spanners.
Precisely.
Spanners.
Spanners, exactly. He is the ultra competent chap who can put together whatever crate Ace Rimmer needs in order to break the next record. And Crichton, he is actually the sort of the superior officer, isn't he? He's the guy in the office who basically needs to give Ace Rimmer his missions.
It is Robert Llewellyn in as himself rather than as Crichton.
Yes, and at one point he suggests, he will be on his bed covered in.
No. You've got to do the whole context, and which is that Melly, the secretary, is buzzing him in, and she's like, I'll. I know you're going to go, Ace, so if you want me, I'll be in my room at lunchtime, covered in maple syrup. Oh, sorry, Melly.
And that's Holly, isn't it?
Yes. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Melly, I don't fraternize with crewmates. I resign. I'll see you at 12. And then he goes in, gets his briefing from Robert, and then who goes, I know it won't matter anything to you, but I'd kill myself if I didn't ask. It's like, if you're curious, I'll be in my quarters at noon, covered in terra masalata. It's like, didn't realize your bread was buttered that way, Chief. It's like, it's not. It's just that you can do things to a guy. It's like, I'm afraid lunch is on Melly. I see. I don't suppose it would make a difference if it was hummus. And he looks down at his paper and just starts writing. It's just
the payoff line from Ace is, sorry, sir, I'm strictly a bum-side-down man myself.
And whichever character he leaves in the build-up to his departure ends up, watching him go, and with sparkly-eyed just goes, what a guy.
Even Lister does that.
Even Lister, yes. Even Spanners can't help himself.
Not to mention the computer falls in love with him.
Not to mention when they end up kissing. I know that was a dream, but
that's slightly later on. Oh yes, because of course the original Ace, the original Arnold becomes the new Ace Rimmer after
there's millions of them.
After several encounters. They were actually really disappointed because CGI was just not there when they made the scene with the escape pod, and they didn't have the time to make it with practical effects. So it's one of the only scenes I think Doug says that Bob says that he regrets, because he's like, it didn't carry the gravitas of what I wanted it to carry. But I think it's quite good. I think he's being overly critical there.
I'll just need to step away, chaps. I'll be right back.
No problem. See you in a bit. The whilst British is gone, we shall run through a couple of super chats, I think. So British Knight says, it was a 20-year-old Britisher that realised that lager is the only thing that can kill a Vindaloo. Mr. Will Guitar says, what's your favourite season? Mine is season 3. Any advances on season 3?
Mine's probably 3 as well, actually. But for purely nostalgic reasons because I bought season 3 on VHS from a car boot sale when I was about 9, and so it just kind of I watched it to death, pretty much.
Fair enough. Radical Liberation? Is he still there?
Still there, Radlib.
He's muted, but he's not muted by me. Rhubba, then, whilst we're waiting for Radlib.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to let the cat in. My cat, not Danny John Jules. I can't choose 3, 4, and 5. I just think 3, 4, and 5 are peak Red Dwarf. 3's got the original polymorph, which I remember crying with laughter when I saw that, especially when the polymorph disguises itself as a pair of Lister's pants and starts shrinking on him.
You'll
I just thought
bonk anything.
You'll bonk anything, would you? I shouldn't be surprised.
But there's so many other ones. Like, what's the one with the where they're playing snooker with planets and they have that time loop? So what is it? I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, that's
Dimension.
That's for goodness sake.
Yeah,
that
I know the one you mean. Only joking.
Yes. Dimension. No, Dimension.
No,
Whitehole.
Whitehole.
That's the one I'm thinking. Yes.
And I just think 3, 4, and 5. It's the peak of the series. I think there's barely any duds there.
Definitely for me, 5 stands out. It starts off strong with the holoship. So obviously we get Rimmer getting laid on the sex deck, which is obviously, and I love the whole kind of the parallel between Casablanca, isn't it, at the beginning, and then the end of it where he gives up his job, and at the end he's just like, I cannot believe I just said that.
It's also got Inquisitor, that series.
I didn't actually like Inquisitor that much, apart from possibly the cat judging himself. It's like, justify yourself. It's like, I've brought joy to the world because I have such a great ass. It's like, some might say that's a pretty shallow take. Some might say I'm a pretty shallow guy. It's just goes on. I really like the Terraforms, that Simoon episode, where Rimmer gets trapped by his own consciousness and stripped naked and oiled for electricity. I swear the reasons that I'm enjoying this are not because Rimmer gets laid and because I also saw him oiled up in another episode. But Quarantine's really great because, of course, that's the holovirus one with Mr. Flibble. And Back to Reality, which obviously we've talked about. But the only episode I don't like really is the Demons and Angels episode from that season, which is the Triplicator one, right? Where they make the perfect Red Dwarf and the evil Red Dwarf, and they have to go onto both in order to get parts. And there's it's my least favourite out of a host of favourite episodes, right? So there's some funny moments on it, like when they go onto the good one and they're trying to work out whether or not it's everything pure, so they order a pot noodle because nothing has ever been able to make a pot noodle taste nice. But it does. But I don't know. I didn't really like the storyline on the anti-Red Dwarf, I guess. Didn't really strike me that much compared to, say, the other episodes. Yeah. Is everyone still there?
Yes, we thought there were more super chats coming.
Good. Right. Yes, probably. Yes.
I think Back to Reality has my favourite guest star performance. Spall. Timothy Spall is the guy who runs.
Who wakes them up. Yeah,
and he basically does his
full-on Brummy
routine from Alf Peterson pet. But that whole thing is blatant. He was blatant.
Yes. Did you get Kachansky? It's like, no. Oh, you twonk! It's the whole object of the game for Rimmer, for Lister, and then of course they get the when he's talking about it, it's like, hey, did you like the Planet of the Nymphomaniacs? Oh, you missed that one. No, I like that. Yeah.
You played the crap version of Rimmer for 2 years. But the thing is, I think because everybody knows a gamer who's like that, You just go, oh, I'm struggling on Call of Duty, or I'm struggling on this, and just go, what? You're struggling on that?
Oh, that bit's easy.
Yeah. I'm definitely not that kind of. Yeah, I'm definitely that kind of person. Academic
I
agents.
think we all know somebody who's a bit like that.
I went to Poe the Person's place, and we were playing a game, and I feel bad because I was too good at it. Yeah, but never mind. Coney, current year, says, one of my favourite episodes was Planet of the Rimmers. Yes, that's the one where
Rimmer World.
Rimmer World, yes, where
even the women are Rimmer.
Even the women are Rimmer, and it's such a good cut when he opens the mask up. It's like, do not gaze upon the beauty of her countenance. Opens it up and it's Rimmer in lipstick. It's just it's so grim.
I think the best thing has to be the Chinese balls that he's got, and then
Oh,
when they go and rescue him, and they're absolutely tiny. They've worn down to nothing.
Yes, don't try and avoid stressful situations, and then they go onto the simulant ship, isn't it, that kicks it all off?
Yeah,
and he ends up abandoning them in order to save his own hide, and they teleport back because Lister needs curries. Because the simulants have curries, because they like to torture people, and Rimmer ends up going there. And I love just the whole segment where he's reading the log of how he comes to create Rimmer World, where he's like, after a few weeks, the pod hatched, but something had gone terribly wrong, and it's just this guy completely naked.
It's a naked Rimmer,
and he's just going. So I tried again. It's like, of course I was, of course I was racked with the ethical considerations that if I made myself a lover, she would be my sister. But in hindsight, I decided I just wouldn't tell her. And away it goes. Yes, and he ends up being put in prison. That's one of my favourites as well. Definitely. Grind those balls, sir. Grind them. And I love the quotes.
Sorry, even the frogs go Rimmer's crap, Rimmer's crap, Rimmer's crap.
Oh no, that's the Simoon one where they're all going.
They're like useless.
Like keep the quotes coming on the side. I love all this. Begone, travesty. It's like, how dare you walk around with that face? That's definitely fantastic, that one. Mr. Wilkins says, Crichton equals C-3PO equals Fraser Crane equals keep going. Anyone want to continue the chain there? I'm not that familiar with Fraser Crane, I'm afraid, so I don't.
Well, me neither. But does anyone know anyone remember offhand what Crichton's full name is?
No.
No. I can't actually remember. It's like I can't remember myself. I just assumed that you would know.
I was just like, I thought you were coming in smug mode, Tail.
No,
with all your
wasn't. It really wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to read it, I can read it. It's like it's Crichton 2x4b523p.
Yeah, because in this Megup video, he says 2x4b. He says, "Oh, that's such a jerky middle name."
Yes. And
you couldn't have just called me Cecil and have done with it.
But at least he said, at least I didn't have this other middle name from this other droid I knew. He was Crichton 2Q4b. Huh. It's just like the dismissiveness of clearly like, what a ridiculous name, 2Q4b. How ridiculous. Although, speaking of Crichton, do you remember at the beginning of the kind of Crichton saga, as it were, like his first episode, they recorded a song called Tongue Tied. Tongue Tied, wasn't it?
Someone's buzzing.
Is it me? It's possibly me if I'm. Let me.
Yes, it's whenever you talk. So.
Yes, it's whenever I talk. Okay, let me just move a couple of bits and pieces.
But yes, I remember Tongue Tied.
Has that cleared it up?
Yes.
Well, okay, good. So yeah, Tongue Tied, where which was actually, Danny John Jules wrote the song, as far as I'm aware, and it actually did chart in the UK for a little while.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, but they worked out that for that episode, they actually put in about twice as much effort into producing that song at the beginning for a skit than they did into the actual episode, because none of them had ever done choreography before.
Yeah, apparently there's about 1,000 cuts and bits that feature Craig Charles and Chris Barry because they couldn't dance very well.
Yes.
Whereas Danny John Jules is a professional dancer. That was kind of what he did.
Yeah, and he was pretty good.
So does anyone remember the revolving toilet?
Yes, he's just like crap, and it goes around and makes that awful noise, doesn't it?
It's just under the wash basin. He goes, "Oh crap!" And then the toilet just appears.
Not you.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
That and Talkie, the talking toaster.
Oh, talking toaster's brilliant.
Yeah,
You're a waffles man.
Yeah, I had a T-shirt with Talkie Toaster on it, and it just said, "Will you shut up about smegging toast?" It was my favorite T-shirt until I grew out of it, and I kept it for years after that, and I ended up using it as a duster for my guitars.
Oh no!
Yeah, but it just started falling to bits after that. So,
would you like a ham and egg Breville? Yeah. It's
I love Lister's kind of over the top reaction to Crichton's suggestion of repairing the talkie toaster, because it's the talkie toaster's his nemesis, and just giving the whole machine such a dressing down, a tongue lashing, and says, "Just one question: would you like any toast?"
Yes, he's just like, "You will not offer anyone any kind of heated bread products." And he's like, "Okay, I just have one
you're
question."
a tea cake man.
Yes. And then, of course, that's the episode where they boost Holly's IQ, isn't it? And she ends up exponentially decreasing her lifespan and having to go dark for a short period of time. How did they get out of that one? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
That's the snooker with planets.
That the one where they play billiards at the end with planets?
Yeah.
Must be. Welcome back, British Show. It's been terrible without you. We missed you terribly.
Oh, I can imagine it would be. Yes, I've just kind of sort of received my what can I say, half Tesco delivery.
I see. So it didn't contain everything you ordered then.
It's. I mean, the delivery man kind of looked at me. Well, it's an interesting one today.
No toilet paper.
Oh well, that goes without saying.
Yes. No pasta.
No potatoes in my last order.
Yep. It's
That'd be interesting.
As long as we kind of exist on rhubarb from the garden patch or something like that, we should be fine. But no, of course, when it comes to toilet paper, dare I say it, Arnold Rimmer, of course, was the only person ever to use only the regulation 3 pieces of toilet paper.
What, one up, one down, and one to polish?
Precisely.
Good time to bring that up. We all need to be like Rimmer.
Oh dear. Nicholas Van Neal says, "What a guy!" Thank you very much, Nicholas. And one question for you, Brisha, as you were absent, and also for Radlib, who I presume was either away or listening in the wings. What were your favourite seasons?
Oh dear God.
We've had season 3 proposed, we've had 4 proposed, and we've had 5 proposed.
Well, I'll say this: I'm very the thing that appealed to me the most about Red Dwarf initially was that amazing opener, which I believe was only in the first 2, where it just goes over the ship with this sort of mournful music,
Yeah.
I thought that was marvelous, and such a wonderful intro for a comedy, a sitcom, right? And not only that, but there was, and you see it in the book in particular, it was a long running thing of sort of we're in an existential, and but it's funny, right? And so to me, 2 were sort of more perfectly hewing to that sort of despair, laughter in the face of despair, which really appeals to me. Having said that, my favorite episode is not from season, and I don't know if you did favorite episodes yet.
Not yet, but I do have to say I agree with you to that extent. I think that the early seasons of Red Dwarf really struck a chord. I don't know, there's the humor in it there, but there's also the isolation period, and
Yes.
it's also, you have little things like there's the observation deck, which Rimmer goes up to when he finds out that his dad has died, and obviously he knows that they're all dead, and they have this very candid and kind of, it doesn't really belong in a sitcom, it doesn't really belong in a comedy, but this candid conversation. Obviously, before the kind of continuity was retconned, so that Lister was a an abandoned orphan under a snooker table, pool table, whatever it is. But there's little moments like that which I thought were really special and kind of really endear the series to me.
Well, of course, the first two series had the Holly intro as well, didn't they? There was a little quip from Holly at the start,
explaining everything.
No, yeah, and just how he said that he's got an IQ of 6,000, and that's the equivalent IQ of 6,000 PE teachers. It's just things like that. They're just really good.
It's like,
and then we hope that they've got rid of those saloon swing doors in trendy clothes shops.
Yeah, I need to remind myself of all those kind of little intros. The yes, he's talking about how he's not gone mad, but he's talking to himself and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The what was I saying? Yeah. But it's also like the inspiration for some of the early episodes. So part of the reason that they get up to such kind of kooky adventures and doing things is they have all the different ways that they have to keep themselves amused because they're sick to death of doing things. So, or sick to death of being alone and not having anything to do, and really their existence feels pointless. But there's the episode, isn't there, where Lister loses it, in effect, because him and the cat, he's just bored of being with the cat, and they're playing, what is it, like miniature golf or something like that, with a little tabletop golf thing, and he's just like, "Do you want to play junior angler?" It's just like, no. It's like, and he takes things away, and Lister makes himself a sandwich, and then the cat gets angry at him and takes the sandwich and runs off.
No, I'm looking. Given your question, I'm kind of looking at the various series here because I tend to be more sort of towards the middle of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're on Starbug, I think to me that's the ideal. They're in the confined space of Starbug,
Really?
rather than having this continent-sized ship, if you know what I mean. And at the same time, I feel that by that time the characters have been more fleshed out.
That's true.
The cat has a little more to do other than just, make startled noises.
Yes, he does go from being really the butt of stupidity jokes about, what is it, the leader of the cat religion says. It's like, this is your father and your mother, the idiot and something else, the cripple and the idiot or something like that. And he's like, my father was a dumb brain, and he's just like, yes, that's why he ate his own foot.
Yeah,
yes.
As I say, it was a very sort of, how should we say, constrained character in that regard. Whereas he then becomes kind of the cool guy who flies the ship, whose nasal hairs detect danger,
through space,
from millions of miles away.
But also, he got more punchlines as the series went on. So you would have sort of Lister and Rimmer bickering about something, and Cat would always undercut. He was always almost like an American sitcom character, the kind of wise guy who has the quip to kind of underscore the joke.
Yeah, like in one of the episodes when he says they're arguing with each other, and he says, "Oh, we really are a Mickey Mouse operation." And the cat says, "Mickey Mouse? We ain't even Betty Boo." That kind of stuff.
In a way, if anybody remembers Cheers, I think Cat evolved into kind of an equivalent character to Norm, the guy who just would come in and just underscore all the jokes and just who you could turn to kind of segue from one humorous setup to the other.
I did.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying I did like that he became a little bit more dimensional, shall we say, 3D than.
But I think for that you needed to give the series a bit of time. So Crichton and the Cat are much more fleshed out characters by the time you get to something like episode 5 or 6, something like that. And therefore I think then it becomes much more of a sort of group act rather than just Lister and Rimmer.
Mm-hmm. Although I think they played a lot off of the natural rivalry between Chris Barry and Craig Charles, and that they lent into that particularly because they hated each other for about 4 seasons. They could not stand the sight of one another. Chris and Craig had very different acting styles. Chris being very kind of slightly pompous and very method acty, wouldn't speak to the crowd in between sets and so on. And Craig would memorize not just his lines but everyone else's lines, and you can catch him mouthing them in the backgrounds of some scenes as well. And this apparently used to drive Chris absolutely nuts, and their personalities just did not gel. And even in the later kind of behind the scenesy stuff between the two of them, you can see like Craig will be like, yeah, me and Chris, we're friends now, whereas I feel like Chris has always felt like he's only ever really got to the point of being civil with Craig. That's that.
This is I noticed that on recording episode that Chris Barry would not speak between takes. He would just sit there. But that had the effect that whenever he told a joke, whenever it was his lines, it would sound funnier because he wasn't. They would come out of nowhere. Whereas Craig Charles would sit with the audience often and banter. Some of them are these fan clubs who've been to every recording, so he knew them. Robert Llewellyn is quite similar in that regard. He will just laugh and joke around between takes, doing silly voices and stuff. But when they had the autograph signing at the end, Chris Barry just went. He just and said, "And that's a wrap," and he just went.
Oh, he just wasn't interested.
Yeah, he's a pro actor. He's quite serious. I've seen him do his top 5 tanks for the Tank Museum's website, and he's all business. He really is just all business on it.
And autographs weren't part of the business then.
Autographs is something I think with actors it's something they don't have to do, but it's kind of this thing that.
I mean, he cemented himself as Rimmer the arsehole. Then that's.
I wouldn't say he's an arsehole. He's just very withdrawn.
Yeah, it's interesting that
he's not rude. He's not rude to the audience. He's not rude to anybody. But it's just that he wants a barrier between himself and everybody else.
Yeah, it's interesting that Craig and Chris never really got on because I suppose it really sort of brings out the actual tension of the episode Marooned then, doesn't it? When the two of them are marooned in Starbug. That's probably could be what they would actually be like.
The thing is, when they're performing the scenes, I mean, they don't argue with each other. Oh, you've hit my mark. You've stepped on my line. They do play off each other so well when they're actually performing the scenes. It's like they're not a matey relationship, but it's like each one understands what the other one's doing, and just knows and can predict what the other one's going to do or where they're going to stand. Because so much of kind of acting, and it's a multiple camera setup on Red Dwarf. Well, it was. I don't know how Dave does it. I think they do single camera, but you would have 3 cameras in the studio, and they would cut from one to the other. So they've got tape marks all over the floor where everybody has to hit a mark, as it were, and all the stuff you don't see in the final edit. But they're just hitting these bits of gaffer tape on the floor. And knowing when to come in and to position themselves. Although Robert Llewellyn doesn't. often didn't know where to position. He was always, and retake, Robert's just a step too close to the lens. But,
Okay.
yeah, well, just watching Barry and Craig Charles work was really interesting.
It was speaking of kind of the behind the scenes stuff. As Captain Bees is mentioned, and yes, I was planning to bring this up. The idea of race in the series, which of course was never addressed, which was a godsend for the series, and I think has helped it stand the test of time. The fact that in some of the behind the scenes stuff they can go, oh, you know, we had this thing because obviously Craig Charles himself is mixed race, and the cat Danny John Jules is black, so they made it a conscious effort to never mention race in the series, as if it was not a factor and it didn't exist. And by doing so, they made it perfect because it never became a punchline. It never became a joke. It never became a you know, I mean, as much as comedians of some stripes would say, "Oh, you know, you must only punch up," right? They were never able to fall into the trap of going for the easy racial joke by setting that standard for themselves at the beginning. I don't know. Do you agree? Everyone agree?
Yeah, I think also when it was made, you know, all the stuff about race as either humor in old sitcoms had played itself out and become unfashionable, and even in science fiction, you know, you had all those years of Star Trek, and then Star Trek: The Next Generation was in full swing by the time Red Dwarf came out. So the kind of commenting on race had really played itself out, and you just got left with the characters as personalities rather than anything that was immutable about them.
Which I thought was pretty good. The what is it? You can see Russell Burnham in chat's just saying, "I want to see lady cats with 3 pairs of tits." Just bringing it down, like it's something that amused me outside. There.
Enough that is another Star Trek Next Generation thing, because the Counselor Troy was originally designed to have 6 breasts, and it was an idea that was dropped. It was dropped, you know, when they had to actually cast an actress to do it. And I think Marina Sirtis said, "I am not having 6 prosthetic or 4 prosthetic breasts."
You know,
but it's just like, yeah, it's just like, I think to say, what was the character design on that, and what did they think it would add to the plot?
Did they know that the breasts were? I imagine it was actually more a question of like where the breasts would go. It's like actually there's not that much room. There's not on the back, under the armpits, perhaps, or you know, perhaps at the end of the hand, so you get a squishy handshake every time you go.
Oh, the plot complications would have.
The plot thickens, literally. Yes. Now I've asked you for your some kind of funny moments and who your favourite characters are and that sort of thing, and favourite series. But do you have a particular episode that stands out to you as kind of the best episode or the most memorable?
Well, Tailed already anticipated me with Maroon. That is for absolutely the standout. Though, what is it? Return to Reality or Back? That's a very up there for me as well. But it has to be Maroon. I don't know. There's something about the fact that you could take an episode and you could just do it on a stage with 2 guys and pretty much get the meat of the episode that works so well. I mean, it's the 2 main guys doing their relationship, doing their characters in top form, interplaying with each other in top form. It has that factor, right, which I thought was so powerful at the beginning of the show. They recreate it in season 3 by having them crash landed on this ice planet, and it's the 2 of them alone. It's the little hope, right? And so you might as well just be honest. And it's just amazing and moving and funny.
I can't.
Kind of horrible in certain ways. I just love it.
We've only got two items of food left: can of dog food and a pot noodle. Well, we all know what's getting eaten last. Can't stand pot noodle.
Your guitar was made from
Yeah.
camphor wood.
Yeah,
How can you smell, Rimmer? You're a hologram.
Burn the soldiers, burn all of them, let them set themselves ablaze for the light of friendship. Yeah,
I was Alexander the Great's chief eunuch.
Chief eunuch. Of course, I'd hoped that I was. Of course, I'd hoped that I was Alexander the Great, but now I finally understood why I had a taste for, I can't remember what it was, and a desire to bathe young women in warm olive oil. We all have that desire, Rimmer. It's got nothing to do with being a eunuch.
Crichton, get a hacksaw.
Yes.
I am going to do to Lister what Alexander the Great did to me.
Yes.
That is a truly great episode and a great choice. Anyone else have any?
And I just wanted to add that I find that episode, I've seen, sure, several at least, if not half a dozen. And every time I watch it, I get more. I mean, just the performances really stand the test.
Well, I struggle to select just one episode. I have two episodes that I think, to me, are standout.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is the dimension jump. So that's the first appearance of Ace Rimmer.
Yeah.
And I think the character is so astonishing that, yes, that is one of the best ones. But then there's also another favourite that I love it because it gives the entire group something to do. And this is what I mean. By that time, they were a team where all of them were working at it. And that's the Gunmen of the Apocalypse.
That, I was going to mention that episode.
Interesting pick.
Because that is the episode which won a BAFTA. And it's the episode I can't understand why it won a BAFTA. But it is... that's the episode where Crichton develops a virus because the simulants have upgraded their ship, and then the cat decides that they're going to fly in and destroy the simulants before they get chased in a game of cat and mouse, which I've learned there's only one rule: don't be the mouse. And so they go in and Crichton contracts the virus and he generates a kind of Western thing.
Well, they're playing this computer game.
Mm.
In which basically you're in a simulation.
So just as an aside before we get into that, I love the fact that they have basically 3 different forms of this kind of computer game system that show up through the various series, and in every single one of them, Lister wears out the groinal attachment. Go on.
But it's basically they've got this. As I say, you've got your groinal attachments and whatever, in which you can then partake in the computer game. So they decide to hook up into Crichton's psyche. And I think the computer game they choose has some kind of Wild West theme. So I think Lister is the sort of expert knife thrower. Rimmer is the sort of hard as nails, fist fighter. And the cat is the gunslinger.
The Riviera Kid.
Precisely, the Riviera Kid. And
where's my guitar?
They basically they end in this simulation to then find Crichton as the sort of the drunk sheriff who's kind of given up on his duties. He's given up all hope, and obviously the villains in this Wild West set are going to win. And I just thought it was taking everything out of it. There was a certain carry on cowboy quality to it. And yes, I just thought that was one of the most lovable episodes they made.
It has a good visual gag for me, which I remember, which is the where they become these characters for the Western simulation, and go, okay, let's mount up, and it's all action that you see on the Western set, and then it cuts quickly back to them with the VR headsets, and they're just sort of pretending to gallop on horses. And
very Python-esque.
I like the there's a section in there is when they lose their special powers, and Rimmer has gone up to be bare knuckle fighting one of the characters, and the guy rips off a pole or something like that, and he goes to rip up his own post and he can't lift it, and he goes, excuse me, I think there's been a bit of a mistake. And he gets smacked on the head. And he's like, if you could just smacked on the head. And it just keeps going again and again. But they're continuously bopping him, effectively. And he's like, take your gloves off. Take it off. And they can't get their helmets off.
Yeah, but there's the bit where they where Cat shoots the bullets out of the air.
Yes.
And there was a very long section on the outtakes of them trying to get the bullets to land just so within the camera shot, because the camera's just looking at the floor.
Yeah.
And the bullets just keep bouncing off each other and off the screen. And it's just take after take after take after take just to get these goddamn bullets just to stay in.
The whole episode has... It's almost as though it were some kind of sort of hidden tribute to the Western El Dorado, where Bob Mitchum is the drunk sheriff and John Wayne comes to save the day.
No one's ever seen those films, though, British. So
of course, yes.
20-year-old British.
Rio Bravo, I think you're referring to.
Is it Rio Bravo?
It's Rio Bravo. Yeah. Well, there's two. He did El Dorado. El Dorado.
El Dorado. I think that was with Mitchum, and Rio Bravo might be with Dean Martin. I'm not sure.
That's the one.
So yes, in both those films, you've got drunk sheriffs, and in both of them, John Wayne comes to the rescue. And of course, in this case, yes, you have got Crichton doing the drunk sheriff impression, and the three heroes come to the rescue. And in essence, they just buy him enough time to basically fight the virus. But yes, I found that one together with the first appearance of Ace Rimmer. I think, yeah, those are the two standouts for me.
Fair enough. The Dove program and beyond.
The Riviera Kid.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Amazing. I think for myself, if I'm going to discount Quarantine, which not Quarantine, Marooned and Quarantine, because they are definitely up there with my stuff. Again, it's very difficult to pick ones. If I'm going to go a bit left field, there's a couple. One of them is The Last Day, which is about when Crichton or his replacement is on the way, and he has to be dismantled within 24 hours. So they throw him an end of service party, and he ends up realizing that android heaven and that sort of thing will come up. Robot heaven. Where do all the toasters go?
And Lister makes him a Marilyn Monroe robot, does he?
Yes, a Marilyn Monroe bot, which is enormous and very silver, and it bursts through the wall and sparks, and he's like, I'm sorry I couldn't finish it properly, and he's like, oh, don't worry, Mr. Lister, sir, it's those little flaws that keep a guy interested. But I love the, aside from the story itself, I love the music that plays when they're planning the whole thing. It's just like proper kind of 12-bar bluesy kind of thing. It's like and the Scutters bring
it's like the Peter Gunn theme tune, isn't it?
Yeah. And the Scutters bring him his tuxedo, which says "wear this," and whilst he's doing the ironing, wearing a shower cap on his head and stuff like that. And the and also he basically at the beginning of the episode, I'm trying to think. Yes, he makes the gag when he receives the notice that he's going to die. Basically, he's just like, it's just such a shame that as my registered owner, you have to die with me. He's just like...
of course, his replacement is Hudson 10, played by Gordon Kennedy, who was in a very little-known Scottish sketch show called Absolutely.
Oh, really?
A brilliant show. That, if you can find it anywhere, because I think there was a time when Channel 4 were outdoing the BBC at comedy, and Absolutely and Nightingales were two shows that Channel 4 were just crushing the BBC with. I loved Absolutely. It really came at the start of that kind of new kind of surreal sketch show thing that happened in the 90s, when Fast Show came in and Harry Enfield hit his stride. Absolutely is great. Great ensemble show.
I'm glad at least one person knows what the hell I'm talking about then.
I've got to correct myself, because it's not Android heaven, it's Silicon heaven, and it's not where do the toasters go, it's the calculators go. Where do all the calculators go? Yes, for is it not written, the iron shall lay down with the lamp? I like it, yeah.
But you see, I knew I was lying.
Yes, even though later on he realized he comes to not believe it, I believe. But so there's that one, and there is from very early on. I like the Waiting for God episode, which is episode 4 of season 1, and that's when they stumble across their own garbage pod.
Aliens,
the Quagars. And Rimmer is convinced that it's containing a beautiful 6-breasted alien woman. Yes, and they're going to restore his body, and he's there.
It's a garbage pod.
Yes, and it's a smegging garbage pod. And Lister, when he figures it out, because they have that skit where he's like, right, if you go in there, you're quarantined, Miss Lister. 3 weeks, you're not going to be there. It's like, sorry, what did you say? And he's just come straight back out again. And but when Lister figures it out, he's like, Holly, you must have known that this is what this is. And he's like, why didn't you tell Rimmer? It's like, it's a laugh, innit? it's just the nonchalance of it. I love that. And he's just like, he brings out, it's like the decomposed body of a great Quagar warrior, and it's a chicken. They must have looked exactly like a roast chicken. But
this reminds me, by the way, that I really Norman Lovett's Holly. Just the way he delivered lines just worked for me a bit better.
He really struggled with he's quite an arrogant, narcissistic man himself. And
quite bitter, isn't he?
Yeah, and bitter, and it's caused issues on set, which is sadly why they changed him out. But
well, his episode surely must have been Queeg.
I was going to say, if we're going to get onto
Queeg's one of my favourites.
Yeah.
I just want to mention, just from the Waiting for God episode, that's also the one where Lister is bored and he goes in search of the cat because they haven't found the cat for a while, and the cat is still in the church of what do they call? Yeah, Cloister, the Church of Cloister, with the golden sausage and the hats. They had the War of the Hats because Lister's learning the cat language via the book, and manages to send the old man or the old cat on his way to paradise through that sort of thing. So it was interesting. I like that one. Yeah. So your turn, Taylor. Your turn.
Yeah, I mean, again, just for nostalgic reasons, Backward, one of my favourites, and the more that I watch it, the more that you see what's wrong with that episode, but I don't care. It's a great concept. It was done really well for the time. Backwards is also probably my favourite Red Dwarf book, which is the last 4 book. It was actually the only one written by Rob Grant on his own. But yeah, it's got a lot of good memories for me, and also the fact that Arthur Smith is the comedian on stage and that. So yeah, sorry, someone was about to jump in there.
What did you say was wrong? What do you mean wrong with Backwards? Do you mean continuity issues, or?
Oh yeah, it's full of continuity.
Which episode is this?
Yeah,
sorry? Just
Backwards.
Backwards. Yeah, with the reverse time thing.
Yeah.
Nod,
Right.
no.
Nod.
Why is all the writing
They
back?
must be Hungarians.
Yes, and they both say.
In fact,
And they both say it. Yeah.
Bulgarian.
And then and there's also when they're eating in reverse, and then, the mysterious Reverso brothers will now eat an egg forwards.
And everyone's like, yeah. So why did the gas after he said that?
Yes, I know.
It doesn't make sense, but it's great. I did.
Also, how long are they on Backwards World for? Long enough to establish a variety novelty act, and yet it is not until the very end of the episode that one of them decides to go to the toilet. And
it's a robot.
Rhubba and Crichton that make the novelty act. They go down first, and it's only however long time has elapsed that then Lister and Cat join them.
Right.
However,
okay.
it doesn't make much sense that they were allowed to continue their show before they were kicked out for causing a ruckus with a fight in the bar the night ahead. But
it doesn't make any sense. But
no, but it's great. Although
this episode also starts tailed. I was just being reminded, looking at the Wikipedia entry on it, with the scrolling of what has happened between series 2 and 3, where it starts scrolling and you're reading the and then it just speeds up so that you can't read it, which I just thought.
Yeah, that's great. It explains why Crichton's there, but I don't think I've ever actually managed to read it because I only had it on VHS, and when you paused it, the tracking was really bad. It was so flickery you couldn't even read it.
Oh dear.
Okay, boomer. But yeah, other than that, probably Queeg's probably one of my favorites as well. Even if it is just for the reveal at the end.
Oh, it's a completely one-note episode, but like there's little things in there, like when the Scutters are delivering messages about their rebellion, and and the cat's just like, it's like, how long we got to do this? All day. It's like, all day. It's like, what about my nap? A cat, I have to nap.
Yeah,
it's like if I don't nap, I don't have enough energy for my main snooze.
It's
about the
Norman
episode
Love.
Queeg. The actor who plays Queeg himself.
Charles
quite striking, but I didn't in the UK.
Sorry, what was that? You broke up.
The actor who plays Queeg, I didn't know about. Is he well known to you guys?
Not really. He's only kind of known to me because of Red Dwarf, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he was a choreographer more than anything.
I love Norman Lovett's delivery of the line at the end. We are talking joke of the century. Because that came out.
We're talking. What is it?
April, May, June, July, and
August Fool. Yeah.
I was at university at the time, and back in the old days, in the good old days, we used to have television rooms. So there was one television, about 50 people would cram in to watch Red Dwarf. And because back in those days, we did a lot of practical joking on campus to relieve the boredom, and that became like a regular catchphrase for about 2 years. You'd pile somebody's room to the ceiling with furniture, and you just go, "We're talking jape of the decade." And it just brings, every time I see Queeg, it just brings back happy memory of the practical joke wars we had on campus.
Yeah, it's a great episode. And when they're playing chess as well, and he's just like, horsey to
yes, horsey to Queen Bish 3.
Yeah, it's like you can't do that. Oh, all right.
It's like, it's like, he's got an IQ of 6,000. Is that what he told you? Well, what is his IQ then? It's got a 6 in it, but it's not 6,000. What is it? 6.
I actually really liked. I know we've barely sort of touched upon it, a lot of the newer episodes and all that, but and I would still consider Red Dwarf 7 to be one of the newer episodes. But yeah, I actually really liked Tika to Ride, first episode of series 7.
That's
the time travel one where they accidentally save JFK.
And JFK ends up having to kill himself to drive the conspiracy.
Yes, from the grassy knoll, he has to shoot himself.
What about that grassy knoll over there?
Yeah, he's like, I never asked him of any curry houses in Dallas.
And then they start beating him. Yeah.
What I loved was the canon. Where he says it'd just be picking on chicken, right?
You are cutting out a lot, I'm afraid.
Oops, sorry. Okay.
You want to try again?
Just the cannibalism bit in that episode.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, because they remove the sanity.
Chicken's good.
Yeah, just be picking on chickens, right?
He's like, that's not chicken, sir. What is it?
That man we found earlier.
That man we found. I wasn't just going to leave him lying there. I didn't get any error commands.
He lost his what do they call it? His conscience chip or something like that.
Yeah.
in order to get him through. It's just, oh dear. And like Rimmer's laughing, of course, because he's not. He doesn't have to eat. But the like the later episodes are still good, right? They're just not as good necessarily in some ways, but they have their absolute moments. Like, for instance, what Nicholas Van Neel has sent to us. It says, probably not a popular choice, but I always enjoyed the absurdity of the Rimmer experience in Blue.
Oh, yeah.
He's Arnold
I
Rimmer.
still randomly just burst into that song sometimes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's just
more reliable than a garden strimmer.
You will never need a Zimmer. That's
Yes, he will never
He'll
need
never
a
be-
Zimmer.
What's it? He's so yeah. He will never be mistaken for Yul Brynner.
yeah.
I remember it's kind of like, without him life would be much grimmer. He's handsome, trim, and no one slimmer. He will never need a Zimmer.
He's also a fantastic swimmer.
Oh yes.
Before you get the song, you get the little episodes.
Oh yeah.
As seen from Rimmer's perspective.
And he gets
Oh
more...
no, I just wet me kecks.
Yes, yeah.
He gets
please
more...
Please save us,
and
Mr. Rimmer.
He gives Cat fashion advice. And he's just like, let me at it, I'm gonna kill him. And the further you get along, like the more extravagant his outfit becomes. So that by the end of the little sessions, he's wearing like a full Admiralty uniform, and he's got full makeup on his face.
Or to use a more apt description, he's looking like Clive of India.
And so it's just like, goodness sake.
I mean, I did quite. I thought that the newer episodes on series 10, 11, and 12 they were okay. They were just your average kind of Red Dwarf. But what I didn't like was Back to Earth. It was like a crossover with Coronation Street. It was really bizarre, and they were meant to put a laugh track in, but they didn't. So there were gaps where there were meant to be laughs and stuff, and it just looked awkward as anything, and it was just bizarre. And then the whole reveal at the end that the female of the despair squid is actually the opposite of despair. I can't even think of the word.
Oh, the pleasure squid or something. I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah, and I just thought, no, that's just shit.
That's awful. It reminds me because obviously all of the original Red Dwarf series are on Netflix, but the kind of first few episodes, I think Tika to Ride got one and Stokemere Clippers got one, but Ouroboros and Duct Soup, which are the ones where they find Kochanski, and then the episode afterwards where they end up trapped in the ducts because Crichton is
the heating.
Yeah, and Crichton is jealous of Kochanski or something like that, right? And that neither of those episodes on Netflix have a laughter track, and it is jarring. I never thought I'd miss a laughter track, but it was just like, it's so bad because there's the pauses there where they were supposed to insert the laughter track as well, and it just does not work at all because it just completely breaks the conversation. Yeah, not great.
What do people think when it comes to those later episodes? Was the introduction of Kochanski a mistake?
Well, they needed someone because Chris Barry didn't want to take on the workload, so they had to put someone in. I wasn't sure that Chloe Annett was the right choice. I mean, considering that, in sort of the earlier episodes when it was Claire Grogan, I know they probably couldn't have got her back. Well, it might have actually, but yeah, she was a bit more sort of rough and ready than. And I know she was maybe from an alternate dimension and stuff like that, but I don't know. It never really sat well with me.
She came across as a bit prim, the kind of moral busybody, which I guess that they were trying to go for a Rimmer-esque kind of feel to it, but it just didn't sit well because no one could fill that void.
Just from a sort of a overall picture, was it a good idea to bring in the person who was kind of his distant, unreachable love for whom he had been pining? Do you understand
you
what I
know
mean?
what? I would say no overall, but I would say that at the end, towards the end, when they were in the Canaries, so when they're all in prison on the thing, I feel like that was where. Sorry.
Well, then the brig, wasn't it?
Yeah. So they go into that special deck, the prison deck, and then they're the Canaries, so they're the people who get sent in to see things like the Cassandra episode, for instance, where they all go down in there. I feel like she hits her stride in that kind of thing when it's part of a kind of larger cast of characters where she can stand out a bit more, with a bit different, because there's that whole subplot where before Rhubba dies, he's going to the computer says, you're gonna die because Lister kills you for having sex with Kachansky, and she's up in arms about that, and also some other sections when they're dealing with the viruses when they're trying to escape.
Well, the other thing is, if they didn't have Kachansky, then we wouldn't have a happy period. You know that
yes.
on Series 8.
Oh my god! Yeah, that's funny. It's like, this isn't how you celebrate a period, is it, Miss Kachansky? No, Crichton. Did Lister put you up to this?
I like.
Obviously... No, go ahead.
I like Series 8 more than Series 7. I think Series 7 has high moments like Blue with the Arnold Rimmer experience and one or two other bits. But when you put Kachansky in there, there's no natural blockage between her and Lister anymore. It's like Lister's getting his dream girl back, and there's nothing to. So Crichton, I think, in an episode freaks out that he's been replaced in Lister's affections by Kachansky. But when you bring the whole ship back and the whole original crew back, what happens then is that the barriers are back in. That rank structure has been reimposed. The kind of hierarchy has been reimposed. And now Kachansky is just as unreachable to Lister as she was back in Series 1. And I like the kind of the thematic, the overarching theme of Series 8. Even though I can't remember any specific brilliant jokes in Series 8, I just think of it as an overall better experience to watch than Series 7.
There was the whole thing where Gangster Crichton offers her a pogo stick.
I know. I thought that Series 8 had so much potential. I think if they'd had like a sort of a plot that ran through every episode, rather than it being, oh, what silly thing are we going to do this week? I think if they had tried to actually have a story about Red Dwarf, it did seem to be very quick how it sort of went into it. It went, oh, and now Red Dwarf's back, all the crew are here and everything. I mean, I get why and how it all happened and all that, but it did just seem to be very quick, and then suddenly it was, oh, we're just back to capers every week.
It's also weird because, like, the whole dynamic changed. They had suddenly a much bigger cast. Obviously, people like the captain came back and stuff like that, and I just feel like it was waning anyway. Like, there's nowhere they can go from that. The charm of the series was that they're marooned in deep space, and they have these different adventures, and there's no one really standing in the way of them trying out different things or encountering different Deus Ex Machina, but they're not kind of bound by the rest of society as well, and that's kind of the charm of, you suddenly don't have all these social and legal obligations in effect. It becomes a joke in some of the episodes, like the Queeg one, where suddenly their rations have been denied them because they're not working and stuff like that, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, where would the series have gone from there? They kind of had to destroy the ship, and then that was what ended up happening at the end of season 9, obviously. But they didn't really. I just feel like they didn't really know where to go with it after that. Do you know what I mean?
I think with Series 8, I'm sorry, British chef. Yeah.
No, I think I think they kind of lost something, as you say, when they were no longer marooned in space. And I think it really began when they introduced Kachansky, because once you introduce the love interest,
You just hate women.
Well, of course, yes, but once you introduce the love interest, and I believe there more than likely was an element of in the TV series, but once you introduce the love interest, it's kind of difficult to then try and sell oh, we're totally marooned and we're all screwed in space, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It's because then he's got someone to chase, whereas previously, his entire existence is utterly futile. And
yeah, it takes away the existential crisis.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think with Series 8, where the marooned in space thing, I think, was starting to get played out because they had this situation. They're the 4 schlubs in space, and they encounter all these different things, and they react to all the science fiction tropes as 4 schlubs in space. When you get to season 8, you have an idea, like Taylor said, it had potential that wasn't really developed, that they actually know more about what's going on in space than the resurrected crew, and yet they are powerless to act on that. And I think that would have been a good area to explore, that they are more knowledgeable than Captain Hollister and all the rest of the officers on the ship, because they know exactly where they are, they know exactly what the predicament is, and
They're
they could have
Cassandras.
mined that.
They're the prophetess
They could have
that
mined
won't be
that for
heard,
more.
right? Yeah.
I'm just remembering one particular line that just made me sort of chuckle internally. Do you know what happens when a Tyrannosaurus Rex has a diarrhea attack?
Yes.
It's like we were standing right behind it. We lost 30 men. Yes. Oh dear.
Hey, I wanted to mention that I made a great discovery while we discussed this, which is I've never seen series 10 through 12. I watched Red Dwarf a long time ago, and then I had a lot of children, and
as far as I'm aware,
you've had about as many children as there are series, to be honest.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know. I haven't watched 10 through 12. I tried to watch 10. It didn't grab me. If I'm honest, so I don't know if you're missing much there.
I haven't missed much. Okay.
Oh,
no.
Is it Dave channel?
Is anyone going to champion episodes 10 through 12? Can anyone speak on their behalf?
They're okay. I mean, I sat and I binge watched them all with a friend of mine who really likes Red Dwarf, and he loves particularly series 11 and 12 for whatever reason. And I sat and watched them and went, yeah, it's okay. It's kind of what I would expect.
It's a bit weird when they're playing into their kind of older characters and they haven't really come on, even though they're clearly very much older now.
There is a bit of that, yeah.
So there's a little bit of, especially Danny John Jules is now showing it in the face, as is Craig Charles, and they're going, and also Crichton and Chris Barry are a little bit more portly, shall we say, than they previously were, and it's an interesting dynamic. But it's not going to be awful TV. Right?
Talking about going back to the introduction of Kachansky, as a main character. The other thing was I was just becoming a teenager at that point, so I was fine with it at the time. To be honest, she's quite nice to look at. I'm not gonna lie.
There's a great outtake scene of Robert Llewellyn where, of course, in the first episode that she turns up in a red leather kind of outfit.
Oh yeah,
and it's very tight. And they were debating whether or not she should wear this outfit for the entirety of the season. And Robert Llewellyn basically submitted a request saying no, because every single time she turns around, him and half the male crewmates gets there with their fist in mouth going, oh, it's like, I can't stand there in my Crichton outfit either with an erection. Basically, it's what
the groinal attachment.
Yeah. So that went away.
Well, I mean, there was the bit when she comes down the stairs in a dressing gown and the sort of earmuffs things, and then Crichton just goes, "Oh my goodness, Princess Leia."
Oh goodness, yeah. oh dear, like chat is now divided. Some people are like, 10 through 12 is fine. Davey says, screw 10 through 12, they're crap. So you got that sort of thing.
Fight.
Thank you to Tragic Vision for becoming a supporter. You enjoy your emotes. Those of you who don't know, you can click the join button underneath the channel and get access to emotes. And if you pick one of the higher tiers, there are a couple of extra bonuses in there for you. Die Hard Dougie says, Justice is one of the best episodes. Oh yes, when they take the simulant who they think is like, in this pod is... You're telling me that in this pod is either a beautiful woman or a murderous killing machine? It's a tough choice. And they go off to Justice World. You are now entering the justice field.
When they've got the boots on and stuff like that. But when Rimmer is standing there looking all smug.
Yes, because he's never done anything bad in his life.
That is one of the best things ever, because you know that something amazing is about to happen, and the audience know it, and it's just great. It's a great moment.
I like that. He's there. He's been sentenced, and they change out his holographic uniform for like the kind of standard prison garb. But somehow those clothes are able to. He's like, anything that happens, any crime you commit happens to you. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, try and set fire to my pillow, and you can see the flame going up his back, as he's trying to light this thing. It's like, oh no, why couldn't you just tell me? It's like, it wouldn't be as fun, would it? These sentences, in light of your holographic status, your sentences are to be served consecutively. And you the look on his face.
I have to say the Justice reminds me to mention that as I originally watched the series, I thought of it as just kind of a parody, a satire or whatever, a parody, I guess, of science fiction, right? But then every so often they'd have an episode, and for me personally, maybe I just don't know enough sci-fi, and Rhubba's going to correct me here, but sometimes they had some sci-fi ideas that felt like I was kind of getting interested in the sci-fi part of it, and not just the jokes, Justice would be one of those episodes.
I think putting Red Dwarf into the context of the time it was made, because it airs when Doctor Who is being yanked off television screens, and it comes before a long-running British sitcom called Men Behaving Badly, which is kind of schlubby men being gross and sexist and everybody loving them for it. So it kind of falls in this area where for a few years, Red Dwarf is the only British-produced science fiction show on British television, and it has to carry all the expectations of all the now deprived Doctor Who and Blake Seven and all the other British science fiction. It's got to carry the hopes for a few years.
They take a lot of stuff from Star Trek, though, don't they? Lifted directly from Star Trek. I mean, I don't watch a lot of Star Trek, but every now and then I go, if I do watch, Deep Space Nine or something like that, I'll go, wait a minute, that's just
that's just the plot of this other one.
Yeah,
I like the idea of some things, like things which stand out to me. The White Hole episode was quite funny. The positive viruses, I quite like the idea.
The luck virus.
The luck virus and the sexual magnetism virus.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And then there was just trying to think, the Justice Field. Also Legion, like the
Legion.
Yes.
The kind of the thing, the consciousness which is born of all other consciousness. I like that. Some fun stuff in there.
Even Hollow Ship deals with these kind of. And in fact, Hollow Ship goes one step further than Star Trek: The Next Generation was doing, because they had a hollow deck, and then later in Voyager they had a holographic Doctor. But Red Dwarf was ahead of the curve and just said, "What if the whole ship is holographic with holograms on board?" And they're really going with it. As I said, the show's carrying the hopes and expectations of British science fiction on television, solely on its shoulders, and it has to be a comedy. And it has to be one of these classic British comedies about the hard luck losers and schlubs, and at the same time be interesting science fiction. And the fact that it does it so well I think it's a testament. That's why we're still talking about it all these years later.
Mm. It's kind of timeless in its own way as well, because it doesn't make cultural references.
The fact that it's quintessentially British, so the sort of self-deprecating humor, It's just like, they have technology far in advance of our own. It's like, so does the Albanian state washing machine company.
There's the I mean, I say it's not referential. They tend to reference some actors and actresses which make little sense in the context of the show being set so far in the future.
Isn't it? But I can't remember the episode where they say everybody remembers where they were when Cliff Richard was assassinated.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Now, when you say no cultural, that may be where you're. For me and my wife, we're looking things up because we don't even know. Like, pot noodle is not a term we use in America.
Well,
so there's all kinds of things that you don't even realize are cultural, but they are.
Would we describe pot noodle as culture or the absence of it, gentlemen?
I was going to say there's not really much culture involved with pot noodle. Although the Bombay bad boy.
I can only remember one time in my life when I ate pot noodles, and that was university when the stuff in the canteens was so vile that pot noodle became a possibility.
I'm like, I have some friends at the moment, and I say, what do you want? And they're like, oh, I really fancy noodles. I'm like, great, I've got noodles at home. Let's go back to my place. Let's cook noodles. They're like, no, let's pick up noodles from the shop, and then instead of buying nice noodles, they just get pot noodle, and then they come back to mine, and it's just like, really? Is this what you wanted? You want to effectively drink a pot noodle, and then scrape out the pasta and so on. It's just like, oh, I can't believe it. Anyway,
but Radlib, you'll have to tell us. Do you call them telegraph poles? Because I know Rimmer's got a collection of slides of 20th century telegraph poles.
You mean you still call them that? I thought that.
Yeah, telephone pole.
Telephone pole is what we would say now.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. So would we.
Yeah,
well, at least I would anyway.
One wonderful reference they make is Casablanca.
Yes.
When Lister says, I just kind of had to look this up. I remembered the male part, but I think the female part is entirely made up. Where Lister suggests that Casablanca, the version with Myra Binglebat and Peter Beardsley, was the definitive version. For anybody who's ever seen a photograph of the footballer Peter Beardsley, enjoy.
Okay. I know that that's the episode where Crichton learns to lie as well.
Yeah, the noble lie.
Yes, the noble lie. And it's like, well, we'll always have parrots because there's Parrot's Bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Yeah. Have we touched upon Crichton's attempts at lying yet?
Only somewhat. Only tangentially.
Where because there are sort of one or two episodes, aren't there, where Lister is trying to teach him. So basically, what's this? It's an orange. No, it's a banana. Say it.
It's a small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
Exactly. So eventually he manages to get him to do it, but no sooner does a third person walk into the room, he isn't capable of doing it anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. But the best thing is, though, he goes, what's this? It's a banana. What's this? It's an orange. And the cat goes, you taught him all that?
That's incredible! You guys should audition for What's My Fruit?
and what is Mr. Rimmer? A smee.
Complete and total one.
A smee he.
A smee he. Yes, complete and total.
That's when he's doing his flight test with Rimmer as the test instructor, isn't he?
Yes.
Right.
And he goes down to rescue Camille.
I mean, this reminds me very sure that part of the fun of Crichton is that his face undergoes the most change, right? You see his expressiveness more than anyone, and he's the one with plastic rubber all over it.
Yep, very true.
Oh, they did so well with that. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
He used to sit there for 6 hours in makeup before every episode, and he used to sweat awfully in it, apparently. and it was a nightmare to get off as well. But yes,
Wow.
they did. He really suffered for his craft there. Can you imagine having to turn up to work 6 hours before your colleagues to do the same job? Like, it's just.
But I mean, there was so much to it. I mean, it's not just the mask and everything. And as I say, he must have almost been gurning in order to create that much expression under that much styrofoam, if you know what I mean. But beyond that, it's even his walk.
Yes.
He moves oddly. Everything about him is, and he's not just trying to walk like some kind of mechanoid. He's deliberately making it, stupid. Do you understand?
Yes.
Well,
And they even joke.
He's like, I have a perfectly sensible walk as he walks off.
Yes, he's almost skipping, but with a kind of outward pronation. Yeah, it's funny. Yes.
The thing is just that he never quite escapes his roots as being a butler android, and that walk is part of this kind of obsequious kind of.
It's almost a
dapper little
mince,
walk.
isn't it?
Oh, isn't there that wonderful episode in which, due to some delusion that is brought about by some, sci-fi trap, they are led to believe that Lister is another mechanoid that is actually inferior to Crichton.
Yes, the previous series, and the only reason that Lister looks human is because of the uncanny valley. Effectively, they were too disturbed by the fact that they looked human, so they went back to a more primitive design, so people would know that they were mechanoids.
And now that Crichton is suddenly the one in charge, he becomes this kind of cruel bully.
Dictat, yes.
To
and he's
think
like,
that I have been scrubbing your gussets for years.
You call these biscuits, or you call these sandwiches, why they still have the crusts? And can you not put a picket fence around this display or something like that? And he comes back having built a chocolate finger log cabin.
And that's after they've realised that it's an illusion.
It's like,
he brings it through the log cabin, and then that's at the point they realise it's not real.
He's like, enough. And Crichton is just there going, excuse me, please. I have gussets to scrub.
Yes, I have gussets to scrub. And the absolute goal, I've scrubbed your gussets for 5 years.
There's another one. I don't know what a gusset is. I mean, it sounds funny. I can guess, but anyway.
It's the strip of fabric at the bottom of a pair of pants.
Right. Which we would call underwear. But anyway, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, one of my favourite lines actually comes from the original Crichton, and that's when they all go into, is it the Nova 5? And obviously all the crew have been dead for millions of years or whatever.
So they're all
and
skeletons.
Still, they're all skeletons and all that. And Rimmer's wearing his 2 pairs of socks, one on his feet and one in his trousers. And he's dressed up to the nines with the admiral, medals and everything, and he's pretending to speak Esperanto and stuff. And he comes in, Charmita, and
Esperanto, Rima. He's like, excuse me, you speak Esperanto, Rima? Oh, see.
And he's convinced Lister that those moon boots that he previously said stunk to high the heavens.
Yeah.
That no, they suited him very well and they don't smell at all.
Yeah. And then he says, you could maybe just big me up a little bit, it's called man and all that sort of
He's
stuff.
got absolutely loads of girlfriends.
Yeah, because they're all dead. And then obviously
skeleton.
and then when Crichton comes back in and they go, well, why aren't you sitting down? Because they're all dead. And it's like, oh my God.
I only left for 5 minutes. And then they're like, are you absolutely sure they're dead? It's like, there's a simple test for this. Raise your hand if you're alive. And then he's just going, he's making the motions, isn't he? He's kind of flapping his hands up in the air like, come on.
What does Rimmer ask them to call him? Is it Duke or something like that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Duke,
yeah.
It's
iron balls.
Old iron balls.
That is the episode.
Lister, you can big me up, sort of make me sound more heroic. And then in front of the skeletons, Lister goes, "Hey, me mate's really brave."
This is the episode.
Just some
Crichton.
rubbish in.
This is the episode Crichton where they introduce Crichton original, After.
Yeah.
But that line where he says, "I was only gone 5 minutes."
Yeah.
And Crichton, and let us remember that Crichton is a psycho character, right? He's continuing to tend to these dead people as if they're still alive.
Yeah,
it's actually pretty creepy. You know?
He's applying lipstick.
And
Very
the
Norman
cat,
Bates.
the cat gets stuck at the mirror, doesn't he? And
Oh, 'cause
basically
he's
looks
wearing
to
a
Lister and says,
solid-
I could need a little help here.
He has a solid gold astronaut's outfit on, and that he's painted himself. And then he's just like, I'm looking so fine. If I get near a mirror, I'm going to need some help. So it just gets there.
It also has a good cultural reference joke, which I don't know if Americans would get, but Crichton's watching an Australian soap opera called Android.
Oh, God.
Brooke,
Yeah.
it's about Brooke Jr. He's not your android.
It's a parody of Neighbours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just and Home and Away and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Because good
Because androids need
have feelings too. It's the Bolivian Navy on maneuvers in the South Pacific.
We're just descending into random quotes now. Everybody.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't help myself.
No, that's all
right. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, Boris, the situation is extreme. Step us up to red alert. Big Cash Sunak. Sir, are you absolutely sure? It does mean changing the bulb.
Exactly.
That's a great joke.
That is one of my favourite gags in the whole series.
Yeah.
Yes. First they go to blue alert, don't they?
Well, and at one point
I would
they
just
say
but
they go to purple alert, don't they?
It's just like, but it's like we need to go to purple alert. It's like, but why? We're all here. I would just feel a lot more comfortable if we had recognised the severity of the situation by moving to purple alert. It's like, fine, you know, he gets there. And then moves on to the red.
Absolutely sure, sir. That does mean
changing the bulb.
Does mean changing the bulb.
It's just nonsense. Oh, to hell with all of you, yeah.
Well, of course, there's there is the whole gag about why they were marooned in the first place. Because, you know, you're flying around in deep space for 3 million years, not one black hole, and then all of a sudden 6 of them turn up at once. And then at the end goes, what happened to the black holes? There weren't any. What was it?
Grit.
Well, you see, the thing about space is it's black. You see, the thing about the scanner is it's black.
It's black. It's the same mistake any senile 3 million year old computer could have made. Yeah, I love it.
I'm trying to remember the name of the episode, but it begins with there's a crash and Crichton's kind of
he's in pieces.
Going
isn't
offline.
Oh, and he sends his hand to go and
with the eyeball
call for help.
And then there's Cat and
that is the
communicating over a computer screen.
That's on Series 6, isn't it?
That is this. That's the Simoon one, the Terror, whatever it's called. Terraform, because the whole world has shifted around and smashed them up, and because Lister arrives, doesn't he, after the whole tarantula up the leg? I think it's making a nest in my trousers.
Oh yeah, because that's the whole sort of typing to one another. It's like, you're playing that adventure game.
I've been doing this. You need to look at the rope.
But that has another sort of colour joke because on Crichton's viewer, he's going through all the conditions of severity, and one is condition heliotrope.
Yes, and Robert Llewellyn is narrating to him. It's like, you have sustained critical damage, Crichton. It's like, we're going to hold still whilst... Yes.
And it goes, while we shut down, here's some music, and it starts playing Copacabana.
And then he's there and he goes, I appear to have become injured. However, due to the nearness of the Starbug's reactor, my short-term memory has been completely wiped out. This, in combination with my short-term memory being wiped out by the nearest of the reactor, has resulted in the knocking out of my short-term memory.
It just keeps going round in circles. Well, I like how at the end of that episode they realise the only way to get Starbug out is to big Rimmer up. And then at the end he's like, you didn't really mean all that stuff about, you know, how I was a good guy and how you all liked me and, you know, how I'm not really that bad once you get to know me. And they all just go, no.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, there was, sort of talking of individual gags. There was one in particular that also tickled me, because talking of cultural references, at that time, a lot of costume dramas were being made.
Mm-hmm.
Sense and Sensibility and so on.
Is
There is this wonderful gag with "Supper is ready."
Oh yeah, yep. I think
because I really thought that gag was pretty visceral. It came from the heart. That's what quite a few specimens of the male variety would have liked to do with some of these costume dramas. Does anybody follow me, or is this going over everyone's head?
No, I get it.
I'm just replying to Poe in the side chat. She's asked a technical question. I didn't want to bore everybody on.
Yeah, because that's the one where Crichton, borrows the tank from the World War II
from a different computer.
Yeah, because they're all in their VR game and Pride and Prejudice world.
Something like that. Yes.
Yeah, and Crichton goes absolutely berserk, and then basically says he's made them lobster, and that. And then lobster asks for ketchup, and he's like, "Ketchup? You want ketchup with lobster?"
And his head explodes.
Not brown. I want brown sauce. Like, me, I just like things I'm a bit of I want brown sauce with lobster, and then his head explodes.
But no, it's just this wonderful thing of they're basically sitting there in Jane Austen world or whatever it is, in this little gazebo, having afternoon tea, and the next thing they know, they just hear this huge diesel engine, and this tank, this Soviet tank, comes emerging out of the water.
The funny thing
opens, and out pops Crichton, going,
dinner is.
Anybody have missed it? I said supper is ready, and he just fires the gun, and the whole gazebo goes up.
The funny thing about that tank, they didn't know what they were going to do, basically because they couldn't get hold of one, and they hadn't really planned
the local army base.
They hadn't really planned on having a tank. It turned out there was a reenactors guild nearby, and they had one, so they were able to nab it and obviously have it rise out of the water.
Oh, was it not actually on like RAF property or something like that?
They may have moved it there, but they didn't.
Well, maybe not the tank, but the actual gazebo that they built on.
Oh yes,
either RAF or army property, and that was the only reason that they could blow it up. And they basically got the army to blow it up, and they had no idea how big the explosion was going to be. They were like, "Oh, we're expecting it just to catch fire a bit, and all that." But then, obviously, the guys that knew about the explosion, they went, "You might want to set up a bit further back." But there was a very subtle gag in that episode as well, because they keep having to try and sort out what the hell it is that's making Crichton's head explode. And there's one point when they open up one of his spare heads, and it's like opening up a car bonnet. It's got one of those little arms that holds it open.
Oh yes, yes.
That was such a subtle thing.
I like that. Speaking of Crichton's heads, I like when he gets his wish to become human.
Oh yeah,
in the machine. And
whack at him.
Yes, and he goes back and he's like, Sparehead 3, which is, or Sparehead 4 has got droid rot. It's just like,
it speaks with a Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, it's like, no, my circuits might be shot in a bugger here, but I don't need the likes of him.
During the recording, Robert Llewellyn loved doing that voice of, is it Sparehead 3, who's got the rough northern accent, and he would do the line on the first take, and then on the second or third take, one of them would contain him doing the line with all the scientific exposition, but with that voice, and it would just crease the audience up, every time he did it.
Amazing. Unfortunately, folks, I am going to have to call the stream there, as we've overrun considerably, and unfortunately I can't keep us going much longer. But we will end with this. So if you've got any favourite quotes at all, or if you want to shout out anything Red Dwarf related, now is the time. And I will leave it with you guys.
Well, can I just say that I'm very glad.
I will say.
Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Rand. All right, I was just going to say I'm glad that we managed to get through the whole stream without mentioning Red Dwarf USA.
Oh, right.
That's a whole
never
other
did see
stream.
It is a travesty.
I appreciated the response when I shared on Twitter just recently here that we were doing the stream, and someone responded simply with "Say hello to Mr. Flibble." I thought that was well done.
Uncle Annie, fries him with his X-Vision.
Fantastic. Any closing remarks from any of the other guests?
Well,
What is it?
stoke me a clipper. I'll be back for Christmas.
Stoke me a clipper. I'll be back for Christmas. Yeah.
So what is it?
But what is it? Yes. Only
Only
joking. And with that, it is time to end. Thank you so much to all guests for coming on for this special Fake Accents Unite. Thank you very much to Radical Liberation for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you to Rhubba.
Thank you.
Thank you to Tailed Feature.
What?
And as always, thank you ever so much to the Britisher, who's joined me now for nearly 100 episodes of this show. So, thank you very much, sir.
Well, there you go.
Right.
And with that, good night, everybody. Have a great week.
Good luck.
Take
Good
care.
luck to all. Bye.
Toodle pip.